Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you, yes, you, are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts. My name is Chris.
And I'm AC. And today we are going to do an episode by listener request. And man, we've actually got a couple of these. I kind of like this. It's cool. Listeners will reach out and say, I want you guys to look into this for me. And we don't mind putting in the time. I mean, there's a lot of research to be done. But yeah, it's kind of cool when listeners reach out and say, do something on this. So we are going to do a deep dive into the age-old question, to go or to stay.
Oh, you're playing on my heartstrings with lyrics now. And to be clear, we're not talking about, tumultuous relationships between star-crossed lovers. We're going to talk about when to bug out and when to bug in. And I love the reference this early on. It's fantastic.
Right. No, okay, that's right. Although we could probably do like a prepper dating advice episode. That'd be kind of cool. So remember, kids, always pack your EDC hair tie. That's a good one. That's my prepper dating advice. But also, I want to, give a shout out to the engaged listeners, because this is what gives us ideas. Without these ideas, then it would just be kind of us in the vacuum trying to figure out what you want to listen to. So this is pretty fun. I'm excited for this one.
And AC, I know I missed it, and life gets in the way, but weren't you recently on another interview for All Hazards Prepper?
Yeah, that's right. So I did an interview with the All Hazards Prepper. You were invited, Chris, and I know you had other things going on. But yeah, Blake, the All Hazards Prepper, had me on to his show, which is pretty good. I think we should probably we'll probably pull a couple of sound bites out of there, but maybe you can go check out his stuff. It's a a different kind of take on things. He's got an emergency management background like you, and he does a lot of like the current event weather related type stuff on his show. But he has guests, I think, almost every episode. So he reached out and asked us to be on, and I went on, and it was fun. I got to be a little more like conspiracy theory than I am here, which is kind of nice. We went down a couple of rabbit holes, but it was good. It was a good time. It was a good interview.
And I really wish I could have made that interview, because unfortunately, as much effort as we put into this podcast, and believe it or not, we actually both do research on this. I think, my record for research is 13 hours per episode.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm there.
We do actually have lives and jobs. Being an adult sucks. I really wish that I could go back to the pre, adult life, and
adulting is terrible.
The free light version instead of the paid subscription with taxes. Yep. But we do actually have jobs to do to continue providing this podcast to you. So things get in the way. It happens. But great interview. I got to listen to it early. It is fantastic. But let's jump right into this one. And in the context of disaster preparedness, let's talk about bug in versus bug out, and what that actually means for you, because this is potentially a life-saving decision, and it is a critical decision on whether you bug out, which is evacuate to a safer location, or bug in, which is shelter in place. We can call this by 50 different names. It's bug in, bug out. Do you go? Do you stay? Do you leave? Do you hunker down? What are you doing? But in the context of disaster preparedness, the decision is absolutely critical and depends on the nature of the disaster, your personal circumstances, available resources. I mean, I have a background in emergency management, and my wife, if she were on, she would tell you we disagree about this all the time, whether to go or whether to stay.
Sure.
It's a tough conversation. So I think we are probably the only podcast out there that is willing to take this head on. But my having that background in emergency management, and we're not advocating to rely on, ready.gov and other resources like that. We're gonna reference those when it makes sense. But FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and other government sources, they can provide clear guidance on when to evacuate or stay put when it's logical. And they can also provide information on supplies needed to safely bug in. They're not going to tell you when to bug out or what supplies you need to bug out. They're not prepared for that. So we're going to explore these factors influencing the choice between bug in, bug out. We're going to reference FEMA. We're going to look at U.S. government recommendations to ensure preparedness for various disaster scenarios. But at the end of the day, this all comes down to how prepared are you?
Yeah, we're gonna use these government resources as the guardrails, as just it's the good idea fairy. We're not saying that every time you gotta listen and do exactly what FEMA says or do what ready.gov says, but just using that as your baseline, as your starting point, I think is important because it just gives us somewhere to start. Like, what's the government say? And then you can tailor that to your own specific scenario, right? So,
I can just imagine the US government being like, "Thou shalt bug in."
yeah, like
Staff stomp.
I'm picturing like the gladiator where he's got his hand out and it's like, is he going thumb up or thumb down on this one? And it's like he is bugging in, thumb up.
Exactly.
Yes. So no, we're saying, hey, this is what the government says, and you do you, boo, but this is what the federal government says, and we're going to talk about those guidelines, and that's where we're going to start. So let's talk about the difference first, just in case people need help understanding bugging out or bugging in. Bugging out involves leaving your home or your current location to seek safety elsewhere. This is often due to the immediate threats like the natural disasters. And we've gone into those before, that we've done the hurricanes, we've done the wildfires, things like that. So we've done that. There's also the man-made crisis. There's the terrorist attack. There's the civil unrest. There's the zombie outbreak. There's the Taylor Swift flash mob. But FEMA emphasizes that bugging out is necessary when local authorities issue evacuation orders. So when you get the go now, that's what they're saying. Time to bug out. Particularly for disasters like hurricanes or wildfires, where staying put could be life-threatening, or when they're just not going to be around to come rescue you. So a bug out plan typically includes the pre-packed go bag or the bob, the bug out bag, with the essentials to sustain you for at least 72 hours. That's kind of the magic number there in the bug out. Like, let's get out. We need 3 days worth of stuff. And as well as, like we've talked about before, you need your predetermined evacuation routes and destinations. And that's something you should already know in your area. How do I get out of my area? What are the evacuation routes? What does my local emergency manager say about where I should, or how I should bug out, and when, what directions I should take? And you should have, your My Topo map ready to go for when the grid goes down and when the cell phone doesn't quite work, right?
I was just going to say the My Topo map is a lifesaver when shit hits the fan, because you can't navigate unless you have a point of reference, and My Topo will provide that point of reference.
That's right. Yeah. We already taught you how to land navigate and we've given you the tools to get a custom map around your home or your bug in site or your bug out site, whatever it is. So we're giving you the tools here, man. Help me help you. So now that's the bugging out part. Now bugging in, conversely, means staying in your home or your current location with sufficient supplies to wait out whatever that crisis is. This approach is really suitable when the external environment poses greater risks than remaining in place, such as the pandemics, the winter storms, the power outages, things like that. FEMA recommends bugging in when sheltering in place is safer. That's pretty simple, right? So, provided you have the adequate supplies and your home is structurally sound for whatever it is that's going on.
Absolutely. And interesting side note, the reason that FEMA recommends bugging in or staying in place during a power outage is mostly for traffic accidents, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, I mean that actually makes a ton of sense. If the lights aren't working, then you're just going to have a whole lot of T-bone collisions all over the place.
125%. I absolutely agree with that. But let's explore what FEMA actually says, and then we can talk a little more about the prepper way to do things, because there are some synergies. There's actually a lot of them that mesh up, but there are also differences. So
Sure.
FEMA and ready.gov, which is the FEMA readiness preparedness site, they provide pretty detailed guidance on deciding whether to bug in or bug out, and emphasizing that the decision hinges on the type of disaster or the official instructions. Official instructions are almost always going to trump anything, and that is not a political reference, that is just a trump card. But the decision really does lie with you, because according to ready.gov, evacuations are more common than you might think. So fires, floods, those are the most frequent causes. Almost every year along coastlines, people evacuate before hurricanes. We saw that last year with Hurricane Helene and
Sure.
Hurricane Milton. And it is an official government source that advises you to evacuate, so do so immediately. That's where a lot of people who are in the prepper mindset of, no, I'm going to do this on my own, that's where they get hung up. And mandatory evacuation orders are issued only when there is a serious threat to public safety, such as during hurricanes, wildfires, especially chemical spills, train derailments, overturned semis, anything along those lines. In those cases, bugging out is absolutely not advised. You are going to put yourself in more danger than it's worth to get out of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But conversely, FEMA also advises sheltering in place or bugging in for situations where evacuation could be riskier, such as, like you mentioned, the pandemic. We all went into shelter in place orders. Unless you were critical staff in a critical service, you were not authorized to leave your home to go to work. So CDC recommendations, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they went into effect on that one, and they
Mm-hmm.
recommended staying, 6 feet away from people and staying put during events requiring protection from any sort of contaminated air, or when local infrastructure like roads or public services was compromised. Stay away from that accident, stay away from the downed bridge. You're going to run into somebody who's potentially diseased. But ready.gov notes that in some events, evacuating your home, work, school can put you at greater risk. And in these situations, you should shelter in place. So there's a lot of key considerations to really include here. And part of that is the disaster's duration along with severity. This, I will argue, this is where risk matrix comes in the most important. And the reason I say that is because a situation can develop almost instantaneously. And if you don't have the risk versus reward versus threat matrix planned out ahead of time, you're putting yourself in danger. The safety of your location, your ability to sustain yourself with supplies, everything can develop in real time a lot faster than it can develop on a tabletop exercise. Would you say the same, Macy?
Oh yeah, 100%. And again, this is the guideline because like you said with your own personal risk matrix, I'll take forest fires for example. There may be a situation where I would get that evacuation order, but FEMA and the local fire department, they don't know that I purchased a fleet of old fire trucks and I'm like ready to take this thing on head on, right? So like there are times when you have to rely on your own personal risk matrix and say, although these are the official recommendations based on what I have and what I know and what in my personal situation, maybe I don't need to follow those, but these are the guidelines.
And we'll definitely touch on rapidly developing situations a little bit later. But FEMA and ready.gov, they do outline specific scenarios where bugging out is the best course of action. So, like you said, wildfires.
Sure.
Ready.gov states specifically, and this is quote from their website: if there is a wildfire in the area, be ready to evacuate on short notice. Wildfires can spread rapidly, making immediate evacuation critical to avoid being trapped. Another example is hurricanes, coastal storms. If you do live in a hurricane prone area, evacuation is often necessary due to storm surges, high winds, and flooding. And FEMA advises evacuating early to avoid traffic congestion and ensure safety. We saw this from Hurricane Irma in 2017. Evacuees were faced with standstill traffic and flooding. We also saw it in Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. And there are a lot of examples of people who left early did not face any traffic challenges. They were able to travel 15 hours without stopping. The people who left at the last available notice, they got stuck in traffic in the same spot without moving 5 miles in 10 hours. And just the traffic jams alone, they caused a lot of. Unfortunately, I was able to find examples of opportunistic piracy. And so people were going up north into Alabama, Mississippi, even as far away as Kentucky from Florida, and buying gasoline for $2.20 or whatever it was, filling up as many 5-gallon jugs as they could, turning around, getting back on the road, and selling it for $8 a gallon. So
Oh, wow.
there's a difference between piracy and opportunism. I will say that those people made bank, but there was a huge increase in the reported number of carjackings or supply stealing during Hurricane Milton, particularly because it hit the Tampa area, where people were trying to evacuate and were at an absolute standstill. People were literally walking door to door down the highway with handguns in people's faces saying, "Give me what you got."
Right, because you didn't get out early and then now you're part of the apocalypse. And we've said this before, right? But just a little bit of pre-planning, you can choose not to participate in the apocalypse because you got out early. You're on the open road. You didn't slow down at all because you saw it coming and you didn't wait, right? So, looking for that opportunity, keeping your ear to the ground and knowing when to go, and then having your supplies ready, like we talked about, right? Having that bug out bag. So being ready to go, and then you're not last minute effort trying to throw everything in the back of the station wagon and realizing how bad you are at Tetris.
I'm terrible at Tetris. My wife is the household champion.
Yeah, it's that music. It starts going faster and faster, and it stresses me out.
You and me both. Some other examples of situations where you would intentionally bug out, things like floods, whether from a river, flash flood, storm surges. We just talked about this on a previous episode. They more often than not are going to require evacuation, especially in low-lying areas. Know your flood risk. If you're going to be evacuated by local officials, follow their rules, follow their orders, and the only exception is if you see standing water or flowing water, turn around, don't drown. But we do have incidents in the US of chemical or nuclear incidents. So all of the train derailments, cases of chemical spills, nuclear accidents, evacuation may be absolutely necessary unless you're in a hardened bunker. I don't have one. I don't think you do, AC.
I'm not going to say it on the air if I do.
Well, if you do, I mean, but yeah, I don't have a bunker to evacuate me and my family and the dogs to. So
Right.
we're going to be bailing out of that area as quickly as possible. The other thing is mandatory evacuation orders. So when local or state authorities, if they issue a mandatory evacuation, compliance really is essential. It is, if you don't leave, you are going to die. And if you survive, you beat the odds this time. See that a lot, unfortunately, in areas like California with wildfires. People just do not want to leave their properties, and it's heartbreaking to see an 80-year-old couple who's been on the same property for 50 years and they don't want to leave. Well, now you are more crisp than morning bacon.
And they are not prepared to self-rescue. Like,
Exactly.
those the people, they're like, no, I'm gonna stay and see what happens, and then they call 911. And can you imagine being the dispatcher who's like, yeah, no, we're not coming to get you. Like, you had your chance.
Or even calling 911 and being on a 3-hour hold.
Right. Oh my
What do
gosh.
you do in that situation? You have nobody
Yep.
to talk to. I can't imagine that. So there are times when bugging out is absolutely critical. And it's going to come down to instincts, risk matrix,
Yep.
what is actually a threat. But when you're bugging out, I mean, FEMA recommends preparing a go bag. They actually call it a go bag.
They do. They don't call it a bug out bag. They call it a go bag. That's silly.
Fancy terminology.
Fancy. Get your go bag.
They do say essentials like water, a gallon per person per day for 3 days. Again, the 72-hour rule.
72-hour rule, yep.
Non-perishable food, 72-hour rule. Battery-powered radio. The batteries actually do have to be charged for it to work.
That's true. Charge your batteries.
Flashlight, extra batteries, whistle, dust mask, local maps, thank you, my topo, and a first aid kit. And really, this is the super basics that everyone listening to this podcast should have or should be in the process of building a wish list on how to afford it. Additional items, things like cloth face coverings, hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes to prevent, any sort of disease spread. That all comes down to the CDC. That's going to be kind of the secondary or optional stuff. FEMA actually does suggest having pet food, water, ID tags, carrier in the go bag. Things like that if you do have pets, because a lot of public shelters don't accept pets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, think about that. Yeah, you show up with your pets, they're like, you got a carrier, you're not coming in.
Exactly. And again, for the listeners who are just joining us on episode 38 or wherever this one ends up, for those who aren't familiar, my wife and I have 5 dogs ranging in weight from 9.5 to 130 pounds. I'm not going to have a carrier for a 130-pound guardian breed.
Right. And 5 carriers at that, right?
Exactly. It's just not feasible. So we have to accommodate our bug out plan for that scenario. Um, but ready.gov, they also advise, having multiple evacuation routes. We have talked about that multiple times. Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. Follow your PACE model. Keep your vehicle's gas tank at least half full. How many times have we brought that up, AC?
Dude, that's the one thing that, yes, two is one is none, and keep your gas tank half full. You are so far ahead of the pack if you just do that one thing. And like Forrest told us, right? Know how to change a spare tire. Know how to change a tire and keep half a tank of gas in your car, and you are going to out survive most of the idiots out there.
Absolutely. I mean, how far is it from your house to your best friend's house that you could commit to getting to their house in case of an emergency?
Sure, yeah, it's miles. I don't know, 40 miles maybe. It's far, 40, 50 miles. I mean, that's far. That's it's gallons of gas away, and that's in no traffic.
And at a minimum to our bug out, we're 5.5
Right?
hours.
See, yeah, you got to make sure you've got fuel, or you at least have enough fuel to get to somewhere where, like you said, people aren't out there gouging and all that kind of stuff. So I know, yeah, you really are probably more on the bugging outside than the bugging inside in a lot of these kinds of scenarios, just because, yeah, you're in a neighborhood and that's where things get dicey, right?
It really is. So, uh, if you want to take this one over, let's talk about bug in. When do we
Shh.
bug in versus bug out?
We always bug in. We never leave. But
Oh, this
that's
is
it.
my property. Get off my
That's it.
lawn.
We just you get off my lawn. So yeah, when do we bug in? Well, again, FEMA ready.gov, they recommend bugging in or staying put. When staying is just safer or evacuation isn't feasible, right? There are times when it's like go, 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 and now it's like, nah, you waited too late. Now you're gonna stay. So if evacuation is no longer feasible, now you're bugging in. So some of those scenarios, obviously pandemics, right? During COVID-19, sheltering in place reduces exposure to disease. So in pandemics, you're going to stay put. FEMA advises having supplies to last several days, including medication, hygiene items. Those are both really big. The winter storms, and we've talked about the winter storms a bit on our podcast here. I think we did a blizzards episode. So severe winter storms can make travel dangerous due to snow and ice and power outages, like you talked about. I mean, it's one thing if it's pitch black middle of the night and the streetlights aren't working. But imagine that if there's 4 feet of snow on the ground. It's impassable. You've got to stay put. So ready.gov recommends staying indoors with well-stocked emergency kit to avoid things like hypothermia and road hazards. Power outages are the other big one. And you mentioned this already that, um, you know, if power outages are temporary and your home is safe, bugging in with backup power sources like your generators that you can use safely, or your solar generators, those kinds of things, that's preferable. Hazardous material incidents, I think they kind of go either way. It depends on the nature of the incident, whether it's you have time to go or not. But for some chemical releases, sealing your home, staying indoors is just safer than venturing outside. And we've talked about this a little bit, is having the roll of duct tape and having the visqueen and things that you can sort of seal off certain parts of your home with. That's really important for those hazardous material incidents that may not last very long, but you sure can't go outside right now. and then
100%.
and then lastly, the big one, the civil unrest, the urban threats, right? If external dangers like riots or looting pose a risk, a fortified home with sufficient supplies is the best option, provided you can remain self-sufficient. That's the big one, right? What you don't want to do is bug in with no food or water and then just go get beat up, tired, and hungry.
And this is the one where I, from a tactical perspective, I have to disagree. this one is going to come down to individual situation.
And
So,
location. Yeah, individual, your situation, your location, and yeah, how prepared you yourself are, how good you are with the supplies and the equipment, weapons you have.
and how well you can stay up to date on the location of the mob is a big
Yep.
one, because where we live about 25 miles from a major city metropolis. There have been riots there. They have stayed localized to the downtown area. If they start moving to where we are, we're going to bail. It's not
Right.
worth, we're going to pack up the dogs and leave. It's not worth losing house, life, dogs, everything because some asshole with a shotgun decides to pop off around and storm a house.
Right. Especially if you can
So
head the other direction.
exactly, if you know that everything is to the west of you and you have any sort of escape route east, go east.
Right.
Why are you waiting for more people to show up in your lawn? And we'll talk about the tactical advantages and disadvantages a little bit later on
Okay.
of both bugging in and bugging out. But this one is really going to come down to what is your moral code?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Are you just itching to shoot some guy on your lawn, or is this something that's you're gonna you're going to bug out and you'd rather not put yourself in that situation and take what you have, get your go bag and go, right?
And not only that, are you itching to shoot somebody just to shoot somebody, or are you itching to go to prison because of murder charges?
Right.
That's
Right.
going to make a big difference. If it's a complete without rule of law scenario versus, some, like I said, some asshole with a group of 20 thugs behind him is saying, "We want your house."
Right. Watch your stuff. So still talking about the bug in, right? To bug in effectively. Obviously, this is again FEMA guidelines. They recommend assembling the disaster supplies kit, and that's what we talked about: the food, the water, the essentials, and it's that 72 hours. That's what they've always said. And although preparing for 10 days is ideal for obviously the vulnerable populations, the elderly, pregnant women, things like that, or those with special needs, but you need that basic kit. And there's actually some really good ones on Amazon. Like if you just Google like the 72-hour kit, there's some decent ones. Like the food isn't that great, but it's, long shelf life food that requires little preparation. And they have like the 72-hour one person backpack. And if you're just getting started, that's a very easy place to start. So we're talking about like the water, right? Ideally, it's a gallon per day per person, and that's for drinking and cooking and sanitation. Food, so having that 3-day food supply of non-perishable items. So the canned goods are the really good one. That's the way to go. Probably energy bars are a good backup. A good combination of both. Maybe communications. So that battery powered or hand crank radio, the NOAA weather radio, because I can guarantee you, in any disaster, that is what FEMA is going to use. That is what the emergency broadcasting network is going to use, those NOAA channels. So having access to those NOAA channels is huge. And then obviously having, like you said, the lighting, having flashlights and extra batteries, having the tools necessary to turn off your utilities. If you've got an earthquake scenario, you're going to have to know how to turn the gas off to your house, or you're not going to have a house. So things like that, thinking ahead there. Obviously, the first aid stuff, and there's some pretty good first aid kits out there. And I think we published a list of stuff that Charlie gave us. So there's a couple of different really good first aid kit type options. There's some pre-made ones that I really like, and then there's some good trauma stuff that we've got from Charlie that we've posted. And then your documentation, you've mentioned this stuff before, Chris, like having copies of the important documents, having the IDs, have a copy of your insurance policy. Like you don't understand how important having a hard copy of your insurance policy is. Because I'll give you the scenario is whether you're bugging in or you're bugging out and something happened and the grid is down, you can't log into the computer, you can't log into your insurance company's website, and you want to know, hey, if we have to bug out, is our hotel room, is that covered by somebody else? Like you don't know unless you
Right.
have that hard copy of the policy and you know who to call, you know how to get reimbursed. So I can't stress that enough, that knowing where your insurance docs are and having those in hard copy format, because that really is that 6 or 7 figure check that's just sitting there, and you need your secret decoder ring in order to crack it. You need to know how to use that check. So having that actual documentation is really big. And then any of the special needs stuff, obviously, you need to have your medications, having the infant formula diapers, things like that, pet supplies, medical equipment. If you're somebody that's like on O2, you got to have the oxygen generator, and you got to have a way to generate oxygen. So um, FEMA advises storing these items in airtight plastic bags with easy to carry containers like duffel bags, plastic bins, things like that. So that's kind of the baseline, right? We all have the bug out bag or the bug in bag and this badass, Maxpedition backpack that's got everything you need in it. But these are
Right.
the bare basics for what FEMA recommends.
And they're not talking about, just shove everything in a trash bag and hope for the best. They're plan this out. So
Right.
I do want to talk about some of the factors that are going to influence the decision to bug in or bug out.
Okay.
And trigger warning for some people, this section may get a little bit dark because I'm going to go into some statistics that have been found and they're not pretty. Okay. So this goes beyond FEMA's guidelines. So personal factors influence whether to bug in or bug out. Physical fitness and your own skills. 95% of being a prepper is all mental.
Absolutely.
And that's why you're listening to a podcast, trying to absorb the information that you can and just apply it to what you know and what you know you can do. But physical fitness, bugging out is going to require a ton of endurance, survival skills potentially. If you get off the road with a flat tire, is that different than being on a main highway where someone can help you out? Navigating, finding shelter, if you do lack them, bugging in may be safer unless an evacuation is going to be mandatory or necessary based on your situation. So if you're not comfortable spending a night in the car on the road, bugging out may not be your best option. Family needs. Let's look at that. So families with young children, elderly, individuals with disabilities, wheelchairs, anything along those lines, you have to plan for that. And you may find that bugging out is extremely challenging. So FEMA does advise considering special needs such as medications, mobility aids when you're deciding this. And if it's a split second decision, you have to trust that you are making the right decision. The only way to do that is to plan ahead and understand what your limits are. Home fortifications. So if you are bugging in, a well-secured home with ample supplies, including food, water, sanitation, security system, potentially ammunition, all of that is going to be especially critical if external threats are temporary, such as, like we already talked about, the civil unrest. You do have an inherent tactical advantage when you are defending your own territory and your own home.
100%. Absolutely.
How many times have you, when you originally moved into your house, how many times did you stub your toe on the couch or the coffee table or the chair or whatever?
All that stuff. Yeah, if you go to someone's home you've never been to before, you don't know where stuff is. You don't know what's down at the end of that hallway. You have to ask, "Hey, where's your restroom?" Because you don't have that tactical advantage of knowing that location like the back of your hand. There's a huge huge tactical advantage to staying put.
This applies to generalized warfare as well. Even the board game Risk takes this into account. The defending army always has a 1-point advantage.
Right. Yep.
And so if you are in familiar territory, familiar terrain, you know how to maneuver around this stuff that is inside your house, however it's set up, you have a physical and mental advantage. If you are bugging out and you're on the road, you automatically lose that advantage. And it can become a significant hindrance when you're scrambling for supplies or ammo or defense or anything like that.
Yep.
It's a big it's a game changer, really. It is. We also need to look at disaster duration. So is this a short-term crisis like a power outage, or is this a long-term crisis that has a favor of bugging out, like widespread flooding? There's your bug in, bug out. Is how close is the water? How close is that storm? How close is the snow? How deep is the snow? When do I bug in versus bug out? And information access. I mean, FEMA emphasizes that staying informed via local shelter stations, TV, radio, the FEMA app, even, it will guide you to shelter stations if it knows your location. Knowing the disaster scope helps to determine that best action.
Sure.
This is where I'm going to go a little bit dark. So 100% trigger warning. Let's talk about immediate scenarios that develop. And in particular, there was a study done a couple of years ago that something like 56% of all sexual assault or rape victims and 78-79%, I can't remember the exact statistics, of women that underwent such a horrible, horrible event, they didn't feel comfortable following their instincts in the scenario that got them into that situation, whether it was a club or a gas station or anything along those lines. I will tell you from experience, even if I am the one filling the gas tank, I step out of the car, close the door, my wife immediately locks the doors behind me. I fill the gas tank, she watches for me, unlocks the door, I get in, we take off. But so many times people don't follow their instincts and it ends up becoming a worse event than if they just left in the first place.
Following your gut is amazing. The human gut is an amazing thing, isn't it? And I'm not just saying like my big fat beer gut, but I'm just saying that, yeah, the intuition, human intuition is a pretty amazing thing. That's like that animal lizard brain that takes over. And the intuition is a pretty amazing thing. Generally speaking, if you feel safe, you usually are. And if you feel unsafe, chances are you're not.
And how many hundreds of thousands of years of evolution did that take to get to that point where we can recognize things like uncanny valley syndrome, or hey, the guy sitting across from you at the bar, he might be a threat. I can't tell why. I can't tell how. He might be armed. He might just want to beat me up. He might just want to take my wallet. He might be wanting to buy me a drink and whatnot. I don't know, but I'm not completely comfortable. You have to take that into account. And so many people use their advanced, quote unquote, human logic to override that.
Right. Yeah, because you don't want to you always want to give people, some kind of reasonable doubt. You're like, no, I'm going to give you the
benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, you're trying to give somebody truly like the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes you're like, no, there's instinct there that takes over, and you have to let that happen every once in a while.
Right. And it's a very, very unfortunate side effect of how our society has portrayed several things, is No, he didn't mean any harm. They didn't mean to hurt you. They didn't mean to assault you. They didn't mean to hit you in the face with a wrench, but they did. And how did you end up in that situation? Because you told yourself you wanted to leave and didn't. Follow your gut instincts for your own safety. This is incredibly important and critical in rapidly evolving situations. And anything can be a rapidly evolving situation.
Right. So whether it's bugging in or it's getting out of there, um, what are the considerations that I guess you need to take into account for either one of those scenarios?
Well, first off, you have to have a plan. So you really need to have a family emergency plan. Discuss communication, meeting points, evacuation routes with everybody in your household, regardless of age. Ready.gov actually offers a fillable form to streamline that process. So where are we going? How are we getting there, etc.
Oh, I guess we can post that. That's great. I didn't know they had such a thing.
Yeah, it actually marries up quite nicely with our risk matrix that we posted several episodes ago.
Yeah.
Um, Step two, stay informed. If it's a natural disaster, have the FEMA app ready to go on your phone. It does provide weather alerts, shelter locations. It will actually provide proximity alerts to where the nearest shelter location is based on traffic patterns, which is really cool. But monitor local officials' instructions, whether it's on radio or TV. You've got the FM radio in your car. Everybody does at this point, unless it's a classic. But build that kit, maintain that kit, bug in, bug out, whether or not it's a go bag or not. Have a disaster kit. Make sure your supplies meet your actual household needs, not just your needs. So include pets in that.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely know the risk. So whether it's a local hazard like a flood, earthquake, hurricane, or a regional risk, again, earthquake could follow into that. Larger storms like blizzards, hurricanes, things like that, just be aware of what the threat is and kind of review your community evacuation and shelter plans if you are in a community that has something like that. Practice and train. Do your bug out drills. Pack up the car as fast as you can, and time yourself. I've said it before. When my wife and I were living in Colorado, we got our bug out fire evacuation drill down to under 7 minutes, and a lot of people can't do that. That's a huge piece of it. And then just make sure that you're considering the whole family, pets, livestock. Uh, Plan for the evacuation, for sheltering. Find a friend that's out of the area that you can stay with, as opposed to a public shelter, because they most oftentimes exclude pets. For livestock, FEMA advises mapping out transport routes and ensuring access to food and water. There are some private agencies like Cajun Navy that can help to evacuate livestock if they have the resources available and they're not already dedicated to something else. But yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do to actually plan for bug in versus bug out.
Yeah, the livestock one is funny too, because I see this often where there's a flood or a fire and people are like, I need someone to come help me get my goats or get my horses. And it's like, man, if you knew you were at risk, and I'm sorry if anybody has livestock and I'm talking to you right now, but if you knew that was such a risk and you don't own a trailer to haul your livestock in, or you don't have a friend with a trailer already, that just does seem like a really simple failure point. Like for me, the chickens are probably just going to have to fend for themselves. I don't know. Getting the bees out would be even tougher. I mean, I have captured wild swarms of bees before, and when you're driving down a bumpy road with a box of 40,000 bees next to you in the passenger seat, that's a bit unnerving. I
They're
don't know
not
if
happy. They're
they're
not
not
happy.
happy. I don't know if I could get them in a box again. They're probably going to be on their own, but I don't have large livestock like that. So, yeah, having a plan to deal with that. So, obviously, decision to bug out or bug in during any disaster, it's complex and it's going to be guided by the type of disaster, these official recommendations that we've given you, and then the biggest one really is your personal circumstances. What are you prepared for? What are you not? What's your risk matrix say? Where are the holes? So FEMA and other US government sources like ready.gov, they emphasize evacuating when you're ordered by authorities, particularly for things like the hurricanes, the wildfires, for floods. But they recommend sheltering in place for the pandemics and the winter storms or some of the hazardous material incidences. So preparing for both scenarios requires kind of the well-stocked disaster kit, essentials like your food, your water, your medical supplies, as well as the comprehensive family plan. So you got to stay informed. You have to do your risk assessment, and you've got to practice your preps. All of the things Chris and I have done all these episodes on, you can make informed decisions on how to protect yourself and your family.
And that's absolutely right. And all of this aligns with FEMA's mission, which, according to their website, is to foster resilience and safety before, during, and after disasters.
I feel like I just found out that I have a ton in common with my sworn bitter enemy. I'm like, oh, FEMA, you and I really aren't that different after all. I'm sorry I talked all that shit on you and all your camps for the last 2 decades. You know what I mean? Like, FEMA does have some good ideas here and there.
And all of this comes from experience. So
Sure.
just like all of the AI large language learning models, or whatever you want to call them, Terminator, uh, they all learn from experience and they
Terminator.
develop on that. So FEMA is doing the same thing, but it's not AI, it's people. And people
Right.
take a little bit longer to learn. They're not battery powered like Terminator. But there is a learning curve with this. There is a lot that you can do to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your friends, and so much of that is planning. But
Right.
while we've got a little bit of time left, do we want to kind of talk about some of the specific gear that we found, the gear and equipment that we would potentially recommend to have in stock for both bug in and bug out scenarios?
There's a couple. We don't really talk about the emergency food very often. I imagine there's a lot of people listening that have a bunch of those number 10 cans full of dried food, and I do too. Don't get me wrong, I do. But there's one that I like that's like a Costco bundle deal, and they always seem to have it, and sometimes it's on sale, and it goes on sale frequently. So this is the one, and I've bought a couple of these. It's that Augusten Farms, which they're one of the big, you know, I think they're Utah based, one of their big long
Oh yeah,
term
yeah, yeah.
5 gallon bucket guys. But they have a cool one. I really like this one. And like I said, you can find it on Costco often, almost always, but you can find it on sale on Costco, where what it is it's their 30-day emergency, like 5 gallon bucket of food that's got like all the standard stuff. It's a bunch of different kind of salt noodles and soup, basically. They've got breakfasts and lunches and dinners in this 5 gallon bucket, and it's 30 days worth of food. But Costco does a cool thing where they bundle it with this little like pouch that's a 72-hour food kit, and I just think that's cool for like all slash both of these scenarios where you've got the little, okay, we need 72 hours of food, and it comes with this little bag of 72 hours worth of food of the breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we've got the big 5 gallon bucket of all the food that we need for 30 days. So that's a cool one. You should check that one out um on Costco. I do like that one. That's probably one of my favorite kind of survival foodie hacks, just because it's kind of both. It comes with both scenarios.
The only downside to that one is if you're ordering from Costco, you have to have the membership. So what is
That's
it,
right.
55, $60 a year or something like
Yeah,
that?
if you're already a
$5 a
Costco
month.
person, sure, yeah, or have a friend with a Costco membership. I just like that one because it's a good kit. You can find the same ones on Amazon as well. And then as far as a first aid kit, we've got the stuff that Charlie recommended, and I feel like people go both ways on this. Whenever you ask people, what should I have in my first aid kit? They either say, oh, there's all these kits you can buy, um, or it's the, you know, go get a go build your own or whatever. And there's one I found that I really like that we should post, and I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's like a maybe like a shoebox size thing. It's a Molly bag, and it's an Amazon item. I want to say it's an Everready is who it is. I think it's Everready Industries makes it, and it's a one I like that because I've got that in the back of my uh in the back of my vehicle. I like it because everything's kind of color coded in it. So, it's like anything that's in the green bag is trauma, and anything that's in the red bag is like the hygiene sanitation stuff. So I like that. I also like the fact that it's got its own little carry handle, but it also has the built-in Molly componentry straps. And here's why I like that. In my scenario, I am far more likely to need a first aid kit than my get home bag. So they're separate.
Agreed.
They're not part of one, right? I'm likely what's likely to happen is me coming up on a traffic accident or something. And if that's the case, open the back of the car, grab the first aid kit, and I can go. But in a bug out scenario, the bag like this that's actually got the Molly straps is I can now attach this to my get home bag if I need to go. So it's like this modular design that I really like about it because I don't want my first aid kit that's in my vehicle. I think a lot of people make this mistake. They've got this first aid kit in their vehicle and it's buried down in their get home bag because they're like, okay, everything's there. Something happens, grab my bag, I go. But what happens when, you get T-boned by that motorcycle and you've got to provide first aid? Well, now you've got to dump out your get home bag on the passenger seat and like sort through, Glocks and miscellaneous handgun rounds and stuff to like find a band-aid. I don't know.
You ran into my blazer.
Yeah.
Prepare to eat lead.
So that's kind of that's kind of my advice when it comes to the first aid kit / get home bag, because I just don't like having them together. You know what I mean?
And that makes sense because we do have in both vehicles, we do have get home bags. We also have trauma kits, and
Mhm.
they're very clearly marked. The black bag with the orange piping around it, that's the trauma kit.
Yep.
We come across an accident, both of us are out of practice, but technically qualified to provide first aid.
Sure.
Getting home, that one includes pants, a rain jacket, hiking boots, a water bottle, all of the other stuff.
All the other stuff, yeah, that you're probably not going to need, but when you do need it, it's going to be really good to have.
Exactly. And that's where practicing your preps. I will say if you do order one of these off of Costco or Amazon or wherever you get your pre-built pack, don't leave the zip ties on the damn thing.
Right. Open it up. Open it up. Know where to go. Know where to get your stuff. You think about, know where that CPR mask is. Know where those, the quick clot is. The things that you're going to need quickly. Know exactly where that stuff is. Open it up and look at it. And then I think one of the other things I'd probably add is if you don't have a NOAA weather radio by now, like, come on. Just
$30 will get you the deluxe version that
it'll
has
get you
the
the nice
USB
one.
charger and
Right.
the LED lights.
Yep.
And along with that, the $30 version will get you the one that has the solar panel you can pop out so that it's constantly charged.
Yeah, there's some really kind of deluxey ones having, not just the AM FM and the NOAA, but also having the shortwave, which is just another band that's built into that radio that can certainly help you. Like you said, having the charging capability, like the little hand cranky one, or the solar panel, but having something that could also charge your cell phone. It's just very utilitarian, but have the NOAA radio, because it's not just the weather, but that's where you're going to get just all the emergency information when you need it.
And music if you switch over to FM.
And music, I mean, that's the other thing, right? If you're just sitting around, if you're bugging in and you don't have power, things are going to get very boring very quickly. And having music is probably going to be it's probably going to make you go less crazy.
You're going to have to learn some card games or board games
Yep.
or make your own chutes and ladders or something like that. Because if you're bugging in, we all remember the pandemic and how unbelievably boring it was the first week or two.
Right.
It was, all right, I'm sitting here in my living room for hour 9 today. What the F do I do?
You can only make so much sourdough.
Yes. You can only make so much sourdough. You can only tend the garden so many hours a day before you start stripping out all of the roots of the stuff you actually want to grow. You can only do so much, and you have to occupy the other time or you're going to go crazy and then you're going to start making bad decisions.
Right.
And so I think those are all good points. Having the knowledge on what your capabilities are versus what they are not, and understanding that difference is going to make all of the difference in your own survival on this one. So understand the tactical advantage of bugging in versus bugging out, familiar terrain versus unfamiliar terrain, versus the risk and what you are capable of handling. And sometimes it does come down to a moral code, like we mentioned. So this is all well and good as far as FEMA guidance, but sometimes you have to make your own decision and no one's going to hold you responsible except yourself. So I think that's about going to wrap this up for this week. What do you think, AC?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, join us next week. We are going to be diving into a completely different topic, and we will keep it entertaining as always. But until then, remember, you are your own stakeholder.